Welcome to Corporate Warrior, the podcast that brings you the best advice on how to improve your health, optimize performance, and maximize productivity. With your host, Lawrence Neal.
So, Ted Harrison, you are the founder of Vital Exercise, a high-intensity training facility in Essex, and you've been a personal trainer since the early 80s. Have I got that right?
Yes, you have, yeah. Amongst other things, I've done other stuff as well.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, that actually leads me on to my first question. Tell us a little bit about your background and kind of where you started.
Well, in terms of exercise and training, I was maybe 13, 14. I was very much into Bruce Lee at the time, and I was always out in the backyard punching a punching bag and doing my little kung fu moves and one thing and the other. And of course, Bruce Lee was very much into his weight training as well. So you kind of pick up a little bit of that as well. So I got my parents brought me a little weight set and I used to do whatever I used to do. And then one day I was up in Devon in a place called Exeter, and I walked into a magazine, news agents, and there was a picture of a magazine with a picture of Mike Mentzer on the cover. I'd never really been into bodybuilding at the time. I was very young, and it just looked fantastic. A lot of people have that same reaction the first time they see some guy who's, very, very well developed and they're thin themselves. It just gives you something it's an amazing experience. So I bought the magazine, and from then on, I became very focused on weight training and bodybuilding, and started in earnest really. And then after a few years of training, not like Mike Mentzer, but rather like Arnold Schwarzenegger and the kind of guys that were pumped in the Weider magazines at the time, 6 days a week, twice a day, and just getting nowhere when I was just very, very thin and I didn't put any size on at all. And then I started to sort of read more about Mentzer's approach and started to utilize that and gained some weight and size and strength very quickly. Training, 3, sometimes 4 days a week on very sort of limited, brief, high-intensity routines. And then from there, I discovered Arthur Jones and his writings, the 2 Nautilus bulletins and stuff, the athletic journals. Paid a couple of visits to a Nautilus facility up in Newcastle and had my first few full-body Nautilus training sessions there. When I was about 17, I think it was, and progressed from there until in my early 20s, which was 1983, 1984, I believe, I actually imported some equipment, Nautilus equipment from America, and started up my own Nautilus fitness center, and it was very successful for a number of years.
Awesome. It must have been quite expensive to import all that equipment in, was it not?
No, Lawrence, I just actually, in preparation for this interview, I got a newspaper article that was written, sort of a local paper.
Okay.
That was written about the gym after it opened, and this was written after it expanded to a 1,700 square foot facility. And it says here, which I'd forgotten actually, back then in the day, which is 1984, it cost me £12,000 just on the Nautilus equipment. So if you equate that to the kind of expense it would be now, I remember selling my car to part fund it and various things like that. So yeah, it wasn't cheap.
Amazing. Oh, it's a lot of money back then, certainly. Yeah. That's actually a real dream of mine one day, would be to start a high intensity training gym myself.
Yes.
But obviously one needs quite a bit of capital to do that. But one day. So did you ever, I was just going to ask actually, did you ever compete at sort of professional level or any kind of I know bodybuilding isn't big in the UK, but did you ever compete at any level?
I did. I competed as a bodybuilder, done a couple of shows as a natural bodybuilder, again back in the 80s with, I forget the name of the organisation now, but it was natural. It was, I believe it was lie detector test they used to do. So I did. Yeah, I did very well actually. I won my first contest in Guildford. I did do that. That was actually even with the Nautilus strength training philosophy and, the philosophy of health and general conditioning, my focus was still very much on muscular development. It was very bodybuilding focused at the time. So it was natural for me to sort of, try my hand in the competitive arena, as it were.
Okay, good. So in terms of high-intensity strength training in the UK, what do you think about its general awareness?
I think a lot of people confuse it, first of all, with high-intensity interval training. Mm-hmm. I think it's certainly not as well known as it should be. You have people like Simon Shawcross, who's doing a wonderful job of pushing it out there with his HIT uni. But the public awareness, most of the people that come to me don't come to me because I specialise in high-intensity training. They have no idea what that is. I think they're attracted to the brevity of the workout, which I advertise quite a lot. But I don't certainly push, that it is a high-intensity facility directly at people. It is advertised on my website as such, but it may now focus on pushing it as strength training, weight training, So in terms of a sort of countrywide, no, I don't believe it is anywhere near as popular as it should be.
Yeah. Do you think it's moving in the right direction?
Like I say, there are some good people out there. So I think the science behind it, with people like James Steele, and who sort of got his way into academia and publishing quite a few articles and studies on high-intensity weight training, I think it's slow but steady. And the great thing that it has on its side is it's correct. It works. So with that in mind, it's very difficult to hold a good idea down. And when people experience it and find out that it works, it's a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, really. It's just being able to hang in there long enough for the business side of it to, come on board. It's the science is true, the science works, but you then got to convince people to walk through the door and start spending money in your facility.
Yeah, science is one thing, marketing's another, isn't it?
Entirely, yeah.
It's like Doug said, I thought he put it really well. He said, people ask, why hasn't high-intensity training really kicked off? High-intensity strength training in its true sense. And he said, one, we're probably really crap at marketing, and two, it's just too bloody hard for most people.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that.
which I certainly agree with that. I know that my best workouts, the most productive ones, are always the most painful experiences I've had that month, probably. Okay, cool. So in terms of your business, and I guess your high-intensity training aims, do you have sort of long-term goals for the business and that you're sort of focusing on?
Yeah, I think as far as any business is concerned, you have to watch your bottom line. You must be very, very aware of not spending too much money at the outset, so that it can allow the business to grow without the stress of money. Because I think once you have a lot of money stress involved in a business, it affects your decision-making process, which can hold the business back in a lot of cases, particularly if you're not, very business-minded. So I tend to look at my business in 3-year lumps, which is what my lease is, where my facility is. It's in 3 years. Every 3 years I can renew. So I set out with the intention of having 25 people within 3 years, and I'm on course to do that. I come up my first 3 years in this location at the end of this year. So I knew that if I could have 25 paying customers, some once a week, some twice, that would equate to me being able to go on again, maybe in a bigger unit, and try and push for 30 or 40 people. So that is how I look at it, providing I'm not spending too much money. I want my rent paid. I want all my expenses covered, so that I can then focus on the business without laying awake at 3 o'clock in the morning worrying about the bank manager. Do you understand what I mean?
Perfect, yeah. So I think that's a great way of looking at it. You're quite pragmatic.
Yeah.
But you've got kind of solid, specific key performance indicators.
Yes.
Which makes sense. I don't know, I run an idea past you, which I'm seriously thinking about. Obviously, I'm currently doing Simon's HIT Uni personal training course, which I'm really enjoying.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about going on one of these kind of crowdsourcing platforms like Kickstarter and basically pitching the acquisition of a facility and then building another high-intensity training gym and actually getting the capital from something like a crowdsourcing platform. I don't know, are you familiar with that approach? And
vaguely, yeah. I mean, you're getting a group of people to invest in your project. Simple as that, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess I'm just toying with the idea. Do you think that could be an effective method to building a business?
I do. I think as long as you can stay out the clutches of the banks these days, I think you're making a wise decision. You don't need to spend a lot of money to get into this business. I mean, you can buy very, very good quality second-hand equipment. You can, find an affordable location. It doesn't have to be in the town centre because people come to you. Mm-hmm. So, and it doesn't need to be big. I mean, my facility is really like a large living room. It's 300 square foot, so it's not big. Mm-hmm. And that has a lot of positives. It's cheap. It's cheap to run. I have no real overheads except for, the electric and the internet, the telephone. So, I like the idea, Lawrence. It sounds good, but I'm always I'm 53 years old and I've been involved in businesses on and off and had my arse handed to me a few times. So, you must be very, very cognizant of the fact of keeping your finances under control because you're very keen on high-intensity training, and anyone who wants to get into the business is the same way. So what can happen is the passion that drives you towards the business and your love of the business will be destroyed due to financial worries and financial stress. And then it just turned into a job. What you want to do is you want to be I know I'm going over the same thing again, but you need to be very tight and very cognizant of your outgoings. Start it up as cheaply as possible because you can always grow from that. And you want to be in that gym training people and enjoying it because the idea is to do something, I would presume, that you love to do. And I know when I go to work, and I've done other jobs and have businesses as well, I never enjoyed it as much as I do now because I'm doing something I really enjoy and I also earn a reasonable living out of it and I'm helping people. And that's a great thing because you can feel good about yourself by the fact that you have done something good in this world. You go to work and you're helping to repair people's lower back injuries and making them more functional in their day-to-day lives, and that is great, and then you've got that on top of the fact that you're not beholden to any boss and no one can tell you what to do. And it can be a little dream, providing you're not, as I say, waking up at 3 a.m. worrying about how you're going to pay the bills.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. So let's look at your business and the way you approach your clients in high-intensity training. So what kind of workout do you use to train your clients? Like, what's the starting point when you get a new person through the door?
Well, I have a sort of a consultation session where I sit down with the person and discuss what their requirements are, and we ascertain their abilities and what they can and can't do. And then I take them through the machines one at a time and assess the right seat positions and seat back positions. And then we go over movement patterns, relatively smooth and slow repetition speed. And then we reach a starting point of weight. And then they come back for the next session. And that's where we begin. Some people can't do all of the exercises. Generally, I have 6 main exercises. I have a leg press, chest press, pull down, row, overhead press, and a lower back exercise. Now, not everyone can do all of those exercises. Some can, some can't. Maybe a person has a knee injury, so we have to try and rehabilitate that without the leg press before, maybe set the seat so far back it's a very few inches range of motion to start. Some people can't, particularly I've noticed this a lot with women, as they get problems with overhead pressing. So that is, they tend to strain high up on the tricep or on the shoulder, if you push a lady into overhead pressing too soon, physiologically I have no idea what that is, but I am very aware of that. So it's just, if they can do all 5 or 6 exercises, fine. If they can't, they do whatever they can do. Generally, they might be just, say, a big 3. They might do a leg press, chest press, and pull down. And then we build from there. It's always progressive. I keep detailed records on the chart, and we progress over the course of, their training history with me.
Okay. So, you've explained the protocol, and well, not in detail, but you've given the type of machines and movements you use in a standard workout. What sort of protocol do you follow?
I call myself a high-intensity trainer, and I am, but I'm not evangelical about that. I'm not, it's not Scientology to me. This is a living, breathing human being that's in my facility, and I adjust the workout to that person. Everyone is required to get stronger, and they get stronger progressively on generally one set protocol. I train them as hard as they're able and push them, sometimes beyond what they think they're capable of, and gradually increase the load and the intensity of the workout itself. I start with the weight first, the strength element, and then decrease the amount of rest time between exercises once the person is able to train hard. Training hard is a learned experience, I find, so
absolutely.
It takes a while for a person to remain, relatively calm when the fatigue is mounting up and the muscles are screaming. They need to breathe and, stay focused. And that takes time. You can't bring a 65 or 70-year-old lady into your gym, sit them on leg press and expect them to go to failure. That's not going to happen. So, by some definitions, me taking 6 weeks to get a person in their 70s to work reasonably hard on the leg press, that's not high-intensity training, but that's reality.
Yeah.
A little bit of weight training correctly done is very, very powerful medicine. I don't think you have to train someone to failure. I think it's a good idea, but I don't think it's an absolute requirement for progress. I think you can stop 1 or 2 repetitions short of failure and still have that client progressing, getting stronger and getting more able in their day-to-day lives. So that may kind of upset some people who are very much into high-intensity training and it's all about one set to failure. But on the ground, it's a different kettle of fish. Lawrence, I kind of liken it to self-defense in some ways. A lot of people teach self-defense that is, very unrealistic. They're teaching blocking and parrying and ridiculous self-defense techniques which have absolutely no reality in a real self-defense situation. In reality, on the ground, self-defense is preemptive, hit someone very hard and run away screaming. That's what it's all about, basically, for most people. And I liken that, an analogy to that to high-intensity training and working with people in the gym. You can read the theories, read the Nautilus bulletins and all of the materials, but once you've got a living, breathing human being in front of you, you have to be able to adjust yourself to his or her wavelength, and train them correctly, and not pick up a book, read a line or a paragraph and say, you're going to do that. Because in reality, all you're going to do is chase the person away. You're not going to be able to help that person, and you're going to lose business. So you need to be cognizant of that fact. Running a gym is different from theory in some cases. It's good to have the theory to back it up and the experience and the knowledge, but every person that walks through that door is a different human being and has to be approached like that.
Yeah, that is a really, really important point. I absolutely agree. I had Bill De Simone on recently. Are you familiar with him?
Yes, very much so.
Good, okay. So I'm actually hoping to upload that one soon. But he's not a HIT purist. He takes the principles of high intensity training and then adds them into his own training style. And he's exactly like you. He has the theory in the back of his mind and understands the science very well and the biomechanics, but he has to adjust dependent on the client and tailor the experience to them.
Yeah.
Now I completely understand now. Otherwise, like I said, you'll just end up upsetting them and they'll run out your gym, and that's not what you want.
No.
Okay, so just to summarize, if there was a standard template, even though there isn't with yours, it's 6 exercises, minimal rest ideally between each exercise,
yes.
and one set to momentary muscle fatigue.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Ideally.
Ideally, yeah, I understand that. Now, do you recommend any supplementation exercise outside of your workout for your clients?
Sure, yeah. Again, depending on the person. I have young guys that come in and they want to gain muscular size, Mm-hmm. So I do, in that instance, we will do more dips and curls and introduce some calf work, maybe some abdominal work, maybe a little more volume in the muscles that they want to increase. If someone wants to, has weak calves, we might do 2 or 3 sets of calf work on the leg press or a dumbbell. And curls, I believe in slightly higher rep for curls, maybe 20 repetitions with a lighter dumbbell for bicep work. After the basic strength training exercises on the machines they're going to use. So there's that, or some people come to me with neck problems, providing that they're okayed by the osteopath or the chiropractor or the doctor. I'll work with some manual resistance with the neck, wrist problems with wrist rollers, holding the contraction point to stimulate the multifidi muscles of the lower back, things of that nature that work around the basic template of the 5 or 6 machine protocol workout.
Okay. And one of the things that Doug said when I spoke to him, which was interesting, is that high intensity training wakes up the active genome in a lot of people, and that they then spontaneously start doing more activity after they've been doing high intensity training for some time. Can you relate to that? Is that the experience you have of your clients, that they just become more active after a while?
I can relate to it 100%,
really?
Particularly in the older population that come to me. It's like night and day. After about 3 months, it's like night and day. They report that back to me all the time. They're so much more active. They're wanting to get on the golf course. They've got no problem walking upstairs with suitcases. They're in the garden. They're walking the dog. That is an absolutely accurate description of the way people react to proper strength training and high intensity workouts.
Cool.
I just agree very much with that. It's another one of them factors that I was saying, Lawrence, that is tremendously gratifying in this business.
Cool, absolutely. In addition to that, so you've got the basic workout plus some of those supplementary exercises if needed. Do you recommend any additional, high intensity interval training or cardiovascular? I appreciate that you are providing a cardiovascular workout, but in the more contemporary sense is what I mean by that. Or any other exercise outside of that at all? Do you advocate any of that?
As an example, I have a lady that comes to me in her 40s, and her workout, her remit was she just wants to, the usual, she doesn't want to get too muscular. Ladies always say that. And she's been with me for 2 years now, but she just wanted to be trim and toned. This is what, the standard advice is to me. Mm-hmm. So I put this lady on a workout where she does 3 exercises on the machines, different exercises. So one day she'll do leg press, chest press, pull down. The next day she'll do row, shoulder press, and lower back. And then I have her hop on the Schwinn Airdyne, which I have, and she will do 5 30-second bursts on the Airdyne with a minute recovery between each all-out effort.
Sorry, is that a bike?
Yeah, Schwinn Airdyne. It's a bike, stationary bike where you cycle and your arms push and pull at the same time.
Okay.
So the whole body is working. So yes, for instance, for her and a few others, we use the bike. For some of the guys, we do shadow boxing for a couple of minutes with a minute rest to, drive the heart rate up in a very practical way. So yeah, I do that. But generally, I cut the weights down, the amount of weight training before they get to that. And we may work in sort of periodization in terms of how much they're doing. They might do 5 exercises for a month, then I'll cut them down to 3 and introduce the high intensity interval training, something like that.
Will you, just so I understand, will you do those on separate days? So you'll do high intensity training one day, and then you might do high intensity interval training with using either shadow box or the bike that you mentioned?
No, that's on the same day.
Same day?
Yeah, so they'll come in, they'll do 20 minutes of strength work and then 10, 15 minutes of interval work with a cool down.
Right, okay, cool, fair enough. I noticed, I was watching some of your videos on YouTube today, very impressive, and I noticed in some of your workouts that one of the workouts, you were using multiple sets and you were training not to failure, which flies in the face of a lot of the stuff recommended by those guys we've already mentioned. Why is it that you train in that fashion?
Because I'm vain.
Please elaborate.
Yeah, I'm 53 years old and I'm vain. And I believe that a little bit more volume and indulging myself in some, basic weight training, barbell movement, which I know and love, has a greater effect on my physique, for want of a better word. If I train once or twice a week on 5 exercises, 1 set each, I get strong and I stay relatively lean, providing my diet is good, but I don't get muscle size. In that respect, for me personally, just the way I'm set up, it doesn't work to really increase my muscle size. And I trained 1 set to failure for 30 years, maybe 25, 30 years. That's all I did. And I was never really satisfied with my physical appearance. Once I switched over to slightly higher volume, in conjunction with high intensity training as well, I found that my physique improved. Just as a quick example, this week I've trained. On Wednesday I did 5 exercises back to back, 1 set as heavy as I could go to failure. Tomorrow, Saturday morning, I'll go in and do 3 sets of bodyweight dips with 3 sets of dumbbell curls, high reps. Then I'll work some lateral raises for 2 or 3 sets, work the lower back for 1 set. So the first workout is very basic high intensity. The second one is more geared towards hypertrophy training. It's not to failure. It's all about trying to get the muscles to look right.
Interesting. Okay. Do you? I know you said before that you understand the science, but you're not obviously as what's the word I'm looking for? As perhaps interested as others. But because I guess I'm trying to understand. I am quite a methodical scientific thinker. At least I try to think I am. And I'm trying to understand, how that works. So, let's see how far we get with this. But if you're training your muscles to failure, right, using the high intensity training protocol, and then you're following up with a not to failure and some additional volume, does that not impede on the recovery?
There's an old saying, and this applies to high intensity training with the theory, just because it sounds logical doesn't make it physiological. And when you go and train a little bit more than the theory would advocate, and you're out there sort of really willing to experiment and not being too close-minded about it like I used to be, you find that the recovery takes care of itself. I think if your nutrition is good and you're sleeping well, relatively well, you can train 2, sometimes 3 times a week. Providing the workout's not stretching into the sort of hour, 2 hour bracket with multiple sets. I mean, I'm only talking about 2 or 3 sets. And I kind of look at it like the basic high intensity workout stimulates the strength gains. And the higher rep volume training, for want of a better word, I mean, it's nothing like what some people do, but the higher rep work kind of has for want of a better word, it plumps the muscle a little more. It gives you a little more thickness, a little more roundness. Helps with vascularity, and you're just pumping a lot of blood into the muscle, which I think facilitates recovery rather than hampers it.
That's really interesting. That kind of makes sense because if you are looking at it from from Doug's perspective in the presentation he did, you're not, that second workout you have, you're not training to the same level of intensity. So therefore you shouldn't interrupt that signal.
Yeah.
And like you said, you know, maybe what you're doing is helping that recovery along. I'll have to give that a shot. That's really interesting.
And also, Lawrence, it's also, you know, I mean, you have to bear in mind that he's correct. Doug McGuff's correct in, you know, allow the circle of recovery to complete. But in my experience, that works for strength, metabolic conditioning, and all of the health benefits you get from high intensity training. But the question to me was, if I do, you know, why am I doing more volume? And it is because I believe for a physique to develop, you know, more muscle, then slightly higher volume is necessary in my experience. So, you know, that is why I do it. I'm not flying in the face of fashion. I'm just saying that, or flying in the face of science. I'm just saying that if you want to develop muscle, you need to do more than one set once or twice a week, in my opinion.
No, it's just, that does make some sense to me, and it's very interesting. Let's talk about calories and diet quickly. I mean, how important is the caloric intake, you know, if you're trying to increase lean size?
Oh, it's vital. Yeah. I think you need to eat enough calories in surplus of your daily requirements, and eat slightly in surplus, not a great deal. Maybe 500 a day extra, 300 to 500 a day extra, and you need to make sure that you're getting some kind of protein in your system every 3 hours. That's always worked well for me and for people I train. Mm-hmm. That's one of the only benefits of having a protein supplement, in my view. It's very easy, it's convenient to chug a protein drink mid-morning and mid-afternoon and before you go to bed. And that will allow you to keep that protein in the bloodstream, so that when the muscles require it, which is muscles grow in spurts, not linearly, I find, that when the muscles require that protein, you may be wasting a lot of it on a day-to-day basis, but when the muscles are ready to grow, you need to have the substrate there, you need to have the protein there. So then they'll take it and they'll grow when they're ready. So you need to keep it in the system. I think that's vital. That's made a lot of difference to my own training and to people that I train.
Yeah, okay, so obviously I understand what you're saying about you need to be anabolic. Is that right? So you need to be anabolic as often as possible in order to to grow the muscles, so the protein needs to be present.
Yes.
Is it also having protein every 3 hours? Doesn't that keep your metabolism upregulated because of thermogenesis?
Yeah, depending on what else is going in. But I think if you're eating pretty clean, particularly if you're watching your breads and your carbohydrates,
sure,
keeping that on the low side, then I think a little bit of extra protein, and fat as well will definitely help you stay lean.
It's just interesting to have this conversation because I started doing the Big Five from Body by Science, and so that's most of the exercises you listed off earlier, and I did that for about. I was already training before then, so I was already doing dips and chin-ups and stuff like that before, but. Then I moved into this, and I would say I did increase size. I definitely put on about half a stone of muscle.
Yeah.
That's good. Doing that, probably in about 6 months to a year. And then, because I used to work out, 6 to 8 times a week. It was ridiculous. And I used to do a lot of endurance stuff as well, and basketball and that. Anyway, and then after doing the Big Five for 6 months, I wasn't progressing. The theory being that I wasn't giving my body enough time to recover. So I had to split it, and then I started doing a shortened workout I started doing 3 exercises rather than 5 every 7 days. And now I'm doing a freeway split, so it's 3 to 5 exercises every 7 days, but they're very targeted. So it's to give more recovery between muscle groups, so sort of 14 to 21 days between some muscle groups. And I've found that I am getting stronger very marginally.
Yeah.
Very marginally. Very small amounts. But my size is the same. And I think that is also due to my calorie intake. My priority in life right now isn't to get massive. I've got a lot of stuff on my plate, and as you know, it is a time-consuming thing. If you want to put on size, you need to be prepared and plan it, etc. But also that I don't do, this additional hypertrophy stuff, which may help. So that's really interesting. Do you have any view on that?
Speaking to you, directly, my advice would be to train the Big Five as a core once a week, and then 3 days later, after the Big Five workout, providing you can do these exercises, I would do chins and dips, 3 sets of each, to more or less momentary muscular failure, but not where you are struggling to complete the last rep and your legs are jumping up and down and you're trying to complete that way. Do them smooth, complete the last rep in good form, and then go to, of the dip for instance, then go to the chin and do exactly the same, and do that back to back in a superset fashion 3 times, and then have a look at yourself in 6 weeks.
Interesting.
And eat protein every 2 or 3 hours.
Okay. I may just fit that in. We'll see, but no, that's good advice. There's a kind of a growth in the popularity of high-fat, low-carbohydrate diets, especially in the US. I don't know how familiar you are, but there's a guy called Dave Asprey who's got a company called Bulletproof.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just released a very interesting book on his diet, which is a diet designed for high performance, just physically but mentally, and health and longevity and fat loss, and it's very interesting. And it's becoming quite a big movement, quite a popular movement. What are your views around a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet? Do you think that's the way to go? Do you think it's very prescriptive? What's your view on diet?
Well, after all these years in training and running training businesses and what have you, you can see a lot of stuff come and go. High carb, low carb, 300-400 grams of protein, all these diets with different names, a Mediterranean diet, all of the different diets that you see, and you kind of become very skeptical. I'm sure you are. You become very skeptical about any kind of faddish diet, regardless of the science behind it, because again, just because it sounds logical, it doesn't necessarily be physiological. But in the case of Bulletproof, I tried the coffee and I put the butter in, and once after my system adjusted to it, I could get through a day up till dinner time, 6-7 o'clock in the evening, without being hungry. That worked. My muscles shrunk like dried out sponges. It didn't work certainly for that, but it did strip me of excess body fat. It wasn't it didn't affect me mentally. I wasn't super psyched, other than any more than you would be when you don't eat. I think if you don't eat for a while, you kind of stay a bit more highly attuned. In general, I think when people come to me and ask me if they say they want to lose weight, the first thing I say to them is stop eating bread. Don't eat bread and don't drink alcohol 5 days a week, because most people are quite bread heavy. They're having their toast in the morning and their sandwich because it's all very easy, particularly when you're working. And most people now come in and have a beer or a couple of glasses of wine. I'm not condemning that. I'm not saying it's bad. All I'm saying is I prefer to just give simple little things that people can do if they're serious about it, and I'll tell them to drop those things completely out of their diet 80% of the time. So I'll say Monday to Friday, no alcohol. Monday to Friday, no bread. If you go out and want to have dinner with your beloved, have some bread. Fine. Have a glass of wine. Fine. But do that at the weekend. And Monday to Friday, stay tight and don't give in to the cravings for bread and alcohol. If that isn't a problem, if someone says to me, well, I don't drink, and they're still overweight, then we need to look at what's causing it. Is it snacking? Is it cookies? Is it chocolate? Is it crisps? Is it, Coca-Cola? And we find out what that one thing is, and it's generally 1 or 2 things, and I just say drop that Monday to Friday. All the rest of it, in terms of high carb, low carb, high fat, low fat, I don't really get too involved in that. I think a little bit of low carb diet in general is very healthy and it works. But prescriptively, I tend to give advice like I just have there.
Yeah, no, that's very good advice. I think you're right. Some people can get so overwhelmed with a diet that, just saying stop eating bread, it's simple, it's kind of binary. And it's just the one change that they have to think about. And I think that can be very effective with some people.
And it's good because, forgive the pun, but bread doesn't bring anything to the table, really. I mean, you can, nutrient-wise, I'm sure you can replace bread very, very easily. It doesn't provide much. In our fetid society where we have tremendous degree and choice of food, then it's not, if you're living in an impoverished country and you need bread to survive, that's a different kettle of fish. But if you're here and you have such a wide variety of healthy food, then you don't need bread. It's a convenience food. And for the first couple of weeks, when people are trying to adhere to that prescription of dropping bread, you'll find that the difficulty is, well, what am I going to eat? Well, how am I going to survive lunchtime without a sandwich? But eventually they realise that it's just a matter of having the interior of the sandwich without the exterior. And having much, much more salad, much more meat, or cheese or prawn or whatever it's going to be, and just drop the bread. And that takes a little while to adjust to, but they can do it.
Yeah, and they feel a lot better for it as well.
Oh, yeah.
When I used to work for my previous employer in central London, I used to go to Chipotle every single day, which is a Mexican restaurant.
Right.
And I used to have, because I used to do the slow carb diet, which is Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Body, which is very, very effective. And I know a number of people that have had a lot of success doing that diet. The reason I went to Chipotle and had a burrito, so I'd have the burrito, I'd have the salad, and it would be a salad box, no wrap, barbacoa meat, salsa, extra guacamole, and maybe some beans. And the reason I'd have it, people would say, oh, you're spending, £8 to £10 a day on lunch. But I'd say, well, look, I don't snack because this is so damn good. I don't need to snack because it fills me up, it keeps me satiated, and it's tasty.
Yeah.
I don't have to think about it. So every day I know what I'm having for lunch. And I don't know how much you know about decision fatigue, but it saps your willpower when you have to sit there and go, oh God, what am I going to have for lunch today? And it actually, it hits your performance later on that day.
Yeah.
And because I enjoyed it so much, I thought I can justify this easily, and I'm pretty good with money. And it's just, I don't know, it's a takeaway from anyone who might listen to this, who wants to have a lunch that works and helps you lose fat. It's Chipotle all the way for me.
Sounds terrific. Yeah.
But I guess that's the luxury when you're working in central London and you've got all these sorts of things at your fingertips. Yes. But at the same time, you've got so much temptation.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So obviously having seen how you look and you training and you're in great shape and it's great to see, have you had your health markers checked recently?
Recently, maybe a couple of years ago, I think I was trying to get my vitamin D3 levels checked, and during that, I had some other blood work done.
Would you mind sharing the sort of results that you remember?
If I can remember, I didn't have any problems. The takeaway, the actual numbers were fine. I think my heart rate was down in sort of, it was about 60, 62 beats per minute. And
okay, that's pretty good.
My blood pressure, I couldn't tell you now, but it was fine. My triglycerides were fine. Cholesterol was fine. Yeah, it was fine, but whether that's training or genetics or a bit of both, I don't know. Both my parents my father sadly has Alzheimer's, but they're both very well. And my mother's 92 or 3, and she still looks fantastic. And my dad, although he's suffering with his Alzheimer's, still looks great. So I think I've got pretty good genes,
that's sad to hear. And have you, I was just listening to a podcast about how high fat can be great for someone who has Alzheimer's. Is that something you've considered?
Yeah, I mean, they were pushing coconut oil, weren't they, for Alzheimer's? Yeah, but I think a lot of that, I mean, I do advise them to get that, get some coconut oil for Dad, but I think a lot of that is preventative rather than curative.
Right. Okay.
I think once you got it, re-stimulating, neurological pathways, and I don't know, Lawrence.
Okay.
It's a very strange thing. It's very complicated.
Yeah, no, I appreciate what you're saying, and I don't think it's looked at certainly from a curative point of view, but I think I literally listened to a podcast about it this morning, and my understanding is that it can help with the condition, and just because obviously the brain uses 30% of all calories that we consume, 25% even, healthy fats can, like you say, can help with the kind of neurological efficiency within the brain in terms of the mitochondria within the cells and things that I don't fully understand. But I'll drop you an email about it anyway. You might
that would be excellent. Thank you.
I will. Cool. Okay. So and also the reason I ask you about the health markers is because I want to tell listeners how much you train at the moment, total time.
In a week, let's say I probably train, including warm-up, a little bit of warm-up, I probably do about under an hour, maybe 50 minutes to an hour. And
for anyone who's listening to this, if you see a picture of Ted, you'll be pretty impressed with that amount of time spent exercising.
But Lawrence, it's funny because that varies. The workout I just had on Wednesday lasted 6 minutes.
6 minutes?
6 minutes. So that was very limited full body workout with, zero rest practically between machines. So I was done in 6 minutes, but then the workout on Saturday will probably stretch to 20 minutes. So, that's 26 minutes. But another week it might be slightly more than that,
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. And for people listening, it's not that you're being lazy.
No.
It's that you physically are incapable of doing any more. And I know exactly how that feels.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So again, I don't mean to sound like I'm giving you a big head, but what kind of response do you get from people when they see you? When they see, I'm assuming most people probably think you're not 53, and they're probably pretty impressed.
Yeah. The only thing that gives it away is my face, probably, and the fact I've lost my hair. But I think generally I get a pretty good response, from people, particularly when you're on holiday or something, and people are, I don't walk around in my Speedos, but if you're around the pool, you can see guys will look at you and maybe you'll see them later in the bar or when they say, yeah, you're in pretty good shape, and they ask about the routine and what have you, and they're generally surprised that I am 53. I must admit, I do get a good response for that. But, if I don't look reasonably good after, 40 plus years of very hard training, then I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah. It's funny though, because, what you're also saying there is you have to practice what you preach, certainly if you're a trainer. Sadly, quite often you find a lot of trainers who look like shit.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's a bit ridiculous, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was going through some of your Facebook stuff, some of your on the Facebook page, and I love the motivation. I love the kind of empowering quotes and things. Are you pretty big on motivation? Do you have any kind of morning or evening routines or mantras or affirmations or anything like that?
I believe very much in limiting the amount of negativity that I read or watch on TV. I don't like to watch the news first thing in the morning or be online on Facebook late at night. I always have a rule where first thing in the morning I'll read something positive, and last thing at night I do a gratitude list, which is basically just a notepad, and you list from 1 to 10 things that you're grateful for or things that went very well during that day, and you do that, just before you go to sleep. You can actually do it just in your mind if you don't have a pad. You just go through things that went well that day and things that you're grateful for. And after you start this practice and you've done it for, a week or two, your mind then, because you can't just write the same things every night, you've got to come up with new stuff. So what that does, it programs your mind to search out positivity in all its wide and varied forms, and you start looking for things in your life because you're running out of stuff like, I'm grateful for my house, I'm grateful for my beautiful children, I'm grateful for my car, my holiday. And after you've gone through a few of the big obvious ones for after a few days, then you start digging down for things like, I'm grateful that I had that lovely walk through the park, or I'm grateful for this little watch that I've got that cost £200 and never let me down. I'm grateful for those beautiful shoes I got for Christmas. And on this goes, and it's like a sort of heat-seeking missile of your mind. that will continually search for positivity. And I think that has a profound effect on the mind. And I recommend that to anybody. And also, I like to be motivated, and I think it's very important to be pumped up sometimes, and you need that as a life support system, as it were. Good motivational books, Tony Robbins or Tim Ferriss or Norman Vincent Peale and classic authors like that to read is great. But I think particularly in terms of training, Lawrence, I think motivation is highly overrated. I think you don't need to be motivated to go to the gym. And I think understanding that fact saves a lot of people a lot of pain, because a lot of people believe that they're failing in some way if they're not motivated and jumping up and down ready to go and work out. They need to understand the health benefits so that they can treat it like brushing their teeth or going to work. It's something that needs to be done.
Absolutely.
And you don't need to be motivated in order to do it. I guess I don't know how many workouts I've had in my life, a lot, into the thousands. I bet I could pick, maybe 100 of them where I've been really, really extremely motivated to do it. You go and watch a Rocky film, the next day you really want to train, but it's not a good thing to rely too much on motivation as a crutch. Have a cup of coffee and go and train.
Yeah, I think you put that really, really well.
And that in itself is motivating. Become the kind of person who doesn't need motivation, and that will motivate you.
Yeah. That's good advice. You just gave me a really good tip, actually, because I also do a gratitude exercise. I have an app called 5 Minute Journal, which I think is really good for people to get started. And you write down 3 things you're grateful for every morning, and 3 great things that happened today in the evening. Yeah. And whenever I get to, like you say, whenever I start writing down the things I'm grateful for, I run out of ideas because I feel like I've written them all down. But you're right, I should start thinking about the smaller things. Typically, I'm sitting there with a glass of bulletproof coffee, and I'm like, God, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I can't write that every morning, so I've got to be more creative and expand it.
Get the brain working, that's what it's all about.
You're right, I absolutely will. Okay, so do you have any favourite books on health and fitness?
Anything by Arthur Jones. If you could, I believe there's both of his bulletins are available online for free. The Steel Tip by Dr. Ken Leisner, which is a collection of his newsletters. That's available from oldtimestrongman.com. That's a great read. Anyone interested in high-intensity exercise should become very familiar with Dr. Ken Leisner. What else? Body by Science, of course. That's a great book. There's plenty. Read your Mensa. Get into your Mensa. Mike Mensa, he was a very intelligent man. There's some pretty good books. Certainly Dr. Ken Leisner and the Nautilus Bulletins. Get into those.
Great. Okay, those will be in the show notes. It's funny because Mike Mensa's been an inspiration to so many. Everyone I speak to is typically his stuff that, started it for a lot of them. Which is the same, which is true for you as well. Cool, okay. Any other books that are perhaps maybe not specifically health and fitness, but you think are just healthy reads for people that are quasi-related to what we're talking about here?
My favourite fiction is the Spencer novels by Robert B. Parker.
Okay.
They're very good because Spencer has a terrific moral compass. He's very, very moral. Okay. And that is a very positive thing to read because he's a great fictional role model. And I think Good Calories, Bad Calories, that's a good book. That's Mark Sissons, right?
No, it's Gary
Taubes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're 2 good books.
Good choice, yeah. And I have actually read Good Calories, Bad Calories. I've read, I've got it. I've read Why We Get Fat by Gary Taubes, which is like an abbreviated version of Good Calories, Bad Calories, but I've heard it's very good. Okay, so just sort of wrapping things up now, I just wanted to ask you one final question that I always ask people, and I'm really going to put you on the spot now. But what are your top 3 tips for people who want to improve their general health and fitness?
Weight train correctly once or twice a week. Stop eating bread and get out in the fresh air and breathe. Get out in the fresh air and breathe.
I love it. Plain and simple. Good stuff. Perfect. All right, Ted. Well, That was awesome. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of that. Is there anything else that you think, I wish I'd mentioned this, or that you'd like to add?
No, I'd just like to wish everybody well. Don't get too caught up in this training thing. It's part of life. It isn't life. Enjoy it. Don't spend too much time fearing your training, because high-intensity training is very brutal and very hard. Give yourself a break occasionally. You're in it for the long haul, and get some pleasure out of it. If you want to go to the gym and blow a bit of steam off and not train to failure, providing that you're doing the correct training most of the time, then go and have some fun occasionally, and keep your calories under control and watch the boozing.
That's great advice. Do you know what? It's really refreshing to get someone from the UK on the podcast. Obviously, I've had Simon on, he's from the UK as well, but you have this kind of lad-esque vibe about you, which comes through. God, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but I think you know what I mean.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Great. Okay. Well, look, Ted, have an awesome day. Enjoy your rest of your afternoon off, and I'll be in touch.
Okay, thanks, Lawrence. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
All the best. Take care. Bye.
Bye.